Hello and welcome to the Premodern metagame breakdown for November. So we're going to be looking at some of the top decks, some of the cards that are being played, and just generally how the metagame is changing over the months. So this is the list of the top performing decks, and it's worth explaining how this works. So when a deck finishes in the top 8 of a tournament, it gets some points. The number of points depends on how big the tournament is. So for that reason, it's not really worth looking at the lists down here in the bottom right, because those are probably lists that just won one kind of smallish tournament. So we generally don't really look at those results. So first, we're seeing that red continues to dominate the top spots on this list, both goblins and sly. These are both very popular decks, and they're also fairly beginner friendly. If you've never played the format before, you can pick up one of these decks and still stand a decent chance at winning. The next thing that stands out to me is that Landstill has really not had a good month at all. Again, as I said, we don't really look at the lists in the bottom right, so it's probably not done well at all this month, especially considering it's one of the most popular decks. However, Tide Control has been doing much better, so it is possible to say more people are moving to that version than the actual Standstill Control version. And while we're talking about decks not doing so well, this is the first month in a long time where the solution has not been in the list at all. Sometimes this deck does really well, sometimes it doesn't do so well, but now it seems to have completely fallen off. Stiflenaut coming in third place. Actually, this deck, it is one of the more popular decks, but it's nowhere near as popular as some of the other decks. So this one is actually punching a bit above its weight, having a very good performance this month. Or is it? We'll have a look at this later when we look at the most played cards. And when talking about decks punching above their weight and having a good performance, we can definitely say that Angry Hermit and Astral Slide, they're decks that are not really seen that often, so to perform this well, it means they probably did very well in 1 or 2 tournaments. We can also say that to a lesser extent for Pit Rack and Parallax Replenish. Those decks are also not really played that often, so they're definitely punching above their weight. And in 6th and 8th, we have Oath and Parfait. I've put these decks together because the Oath lists over time are becoming more and more controlling and similar to the Parfait lists. It's not really super surprising to see these here. They're generally in the top 10, and with this many creature decks, not really surprising. So in 4th and 5th, we have Elves and the Rock. Really nothing special here. This is kind of expected. Both of these decks are very popular. They're both very good decks, so I'm not really surprised by that at all. And I also want to point out White Weenie. This is an archetype that almost no one plays. It's a very rare deck, and it seems to be performing fairly well over the months, because every time I look at these monthly lists, it's almost always there. So I think this is definitely one I'm going to look into more. It's definitely interesting. There's a lot of protection red creatures in this deck, so it doesn't really surprise me it's doing well when red decks are dominating the top spots. So looking at the most played 50 cards for this month, we can really see that Goblins are actually dropping down off this list. So Goblins is becoming less common than before, but it's still putting up really good results, which I think does show the power of the deck. Another thing that we can see is that Landstill cards are completely not on this list at all, and one thing that's super surprising is Mishra's Factory is not in the top 10. Usually this is one of the top 5 most played cards. Here it's 18th, so that really shows that Landstill, it's just not getting played at all lately. And similarly, we don't have any rock specific cards either, which is a little surprising to me, although I think it's more likely because the builds are moving away from 4 ofs of every card. Another interesting thing to notice is Phyrexian Dreadnought is really much higher in this list than it usually is. Often it's not even in the top 50, so I think that really goes to show why Stiflenaut and possibly Angry Hermit are doing better than usual this month, because perhaps more people are playing those decks. I think we can definitely say that for Stiflenaut, because we can see there are other cards from that list in this top 50.